Welcome back, everyone. This is G, and today I'm demonstrating my cloud funnel technique. So the cloud funnel technique, it's a technique that I developed using the understanding of the science involved in fluid art. It looks like a regular funnel pour, but it doesn't work like a regular funnel pour because a regular funnel pour will typically use silicone oil to create the cells, whereas I don't. There are no additives in the cloud funnel technique. You don't need to use Australian float roll. However, if you're in Australia, that's usually the common pouring medium. But you don't need Australian float roll in the sense that you need it to make a cell activator, right? All we're doing here is manipulating the paint using its density and using the funnel as a delivery medium, right? The funnel allows us to place the paints in a particular order and ensure they stack in the puddle in a particular way. And beyond that, you control the density and the viscosity of the paint with the recipe, right? So, first, we need a wet base to enable the movement. We're not using silicone. It's not to prevent the silicone from touching the canvas as it typically would be if you were using an additive, an oil-based additive like silicone oil. This is just to, when we create the puddle out of the funnel, we want it to expand without warping the cells, right? Because the cells are going to form in the puddle. They're going to form before I spread out the puddle, okay? So step one, we spread out a base. And I'm going to tilt if you're on something circular and, you have one edge that's still missing, it might be better to just tilt that part than spin and throw a lot off where the paint is already going, right? The paints I'm using today are, so this base I'm using Blicrylic from Blick, and it's quite soft, so I have to use a pretty small amount of pouring medium to get it to be a nice thick base. And then all my colors are Arteza. And then you have what goes in is a mixture called the lacing mix. And at the end, you have what's called the cloud mix, right? So the cloud funnel technique can produce two types of cells. It can produce lacing that you would typically see in a cell activator, but it's not a cell activator because we're not using Australian float roll. And it can also produce cloud cells, right? And unlike most techniques, it can actually produce both at the same time. You don't have to pick one or the other. You can do one or the other, but you can also do both in the same painting. And I found a recipe that can contain both, right? Because typically, if you use a cloud mix in like the bloom technique, it's not going to work. And if you use a lacing mix in a cloud pour, it's not going to work because they work at very different consistencies, right? But I found somewhere where they can both meet with this technique and you can produce both lacing and cloud cells. You can even control the lacing to make the cells round or to make them look more like traditional swipes and bloom type lacing cells, right? I like to create a swirl by spinning the spin table while I release the paint. And then if you've seen this on Facebook or in short form video, chances are you've seen this time lapsed to about 5 seconds when in reality this is going to take about 2 minutes for these cells to expand. The reality is it looks good on camera when the cells pop up quickly, but it's actually bad for the painting because cells that pop up quickly usually deform very quickly and they don't expand well, right? So you want them to happen slowly so they hold their shapes a lot better, right? So I'm not speeding this video up. This is how long it's actually taking. Typically, this is when I would either clean up the space, wipe the cups of any excess paint that's on them, maybe rinse the funnel if you need to, and be patient. Let this take its time. It could go for a full 2-3 minutes, maybe even if your lacing mix is on the thicker side. As I said, if it happens very quickly, chances are you're not gonna like the end result, or you might. That's what you want. You want a loose sort of cell structure or a more flowy look to the paint. I prefer the very well-defined cells, and well-defined usually favors going a little bit thicker, which is what I've done here. So before I spin anything, I always like to make sure it's centered before you spin. Otherwise, you're going to throw a lot of excess where you don't want it to be, right? And it's also good practice to make sure the sides and the corners are wet before you start expanding. So when the paint expands, it can freely go everywhere. If there are spots that are dry, fluids will always go to the path of least resistance. That's quite close to being fully developed now. It's likely I went a little bit thick on the lacing mix, so it's probably not going to sink more until I spread it out a little bit, which is what I'm going to do. I'm going to give it a small spin. Not very fast. It's generally good practice not to spin fast. You've just been watching sped up videos in short form. When I'm showing it to you in long form content now and I'm not speeding up the video, you can see the spin actually isn't that fast and paint doesn't shoot off the painting or off the spin table. And like I said, it's good practice to always recenter as you spin. Parts of the puddle might be thicker than others, so when you spin, you can see sometimes it expands unevenly. You can account for that and adjust that as you go along. This is a kitchen torch. I'm using it to pop any bubbles. There's no reaction to the heat here. It's just air bubbles from freshly mixed paint. You can see we're getting more cells around the edges from that neon pink color. And yeah, maybe 30 seconds passed there where I just kind of cleaned up the cups. And I think it's best now to expand this the whole way, get it off the sides evenly. You can see that bottom edge isn't expanding as well, so we might hit it with a tilt. So as you're watching this, if you're enjoying the way this technique looks, or if you're thinking to yourself, oh wow, I could manipulate this in really cool ways, this is actually probably my most affordable course, and it's super popular right now because the technique itself is quite easy to grasp, and you'll make a painting you love from like the second try. You know, it doesn't take a lot of practice because the actual technique, not the recipe, the technique itself is not difficult. Unlike, techniques like the bloom where you need to learn how to blow a certain way and it can be kind of challenging, especially if you don't have the lungs for it. This isn't like that at all. The actual control of the technique is relatively straightforward and simple. The course only costs about $30 and the materials are guaranteed available in the US, in Canada, in the UK, in Australia. It's also available in New Zealand if you can get the materials from Australia. It's sparsely available in Europe. I can't tell you for sure everywhere, but most of the materials are available in most of Europe. But don't take my word for it. You can ask me and we can double check together, right? But in most of the English-speaking world, you'll find the materials for this, no problem. And it doesn't use anything remarkably weird or different, or you might, if you already pour in some capacity, there's a very strong chance you have most of the materials that you need. Right, so the links for this course are in the description box. They're also linked in the upper right corner right now. And I'll pin it in the comments as well if you want to check that out. And I do have a course for beginners. There's a bundle where you can get all my courses. I also have a course on Dutch pours. All of them are self-paced. You can access them as many times as you want. And obviously you can reach out to me with questions. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video and this painting.